I'm joined now from Baltimore, Maryland by Gerard Wittstadt. He's a former U.S. Navy judge, advocate general. And in Charlottesville, Virginia, we have Waitman Beorn. He's a U.S. Army combat veteran who led a platoon in Iraq. He's now a genocide studies historian at the University of Virginia. Good to have you both on the program, gentlemen. Waitman, let me start with you. The very prospect of a presidential pardon for someone like Eddie Gallagher, how does that make you feel?
I think it just sends a really dangerous message and dangerous signal to our allies abroad, as well as to our military, about what our president considers to be criminal behavior, and also what he thinks of our military justice system, which is actually a pretty good one. So I think it's a very disturbing message, and I think that a lot of veterans like myself, as well as everyone else, is quite disturbed by it.
Gerard, disturbing message?
Not at all. First of all, we do not have all the facts in. Chief Gallagher has yet to have his day in court. And as the professor knows, in America under the United States Constitution, Chief Gallagher has a presumption of innocence. I personally have reviewed the facts that are available to me, which obviously are not all of the facts. There's certainly some classified information out there that we the public, are not going to have privy to at this point. But I feel confident that President Trump is not going to have to pardon Chief Gallagher. Okay. I feel rather confident that he's going to be found not guilty.
But the commander-in-chief saying that he would pardon him, and even suggesting that no matter what the outcome might be of the trial, he's going to pardon him. Let's just, for the sake of our viewers, just a reminder again, Gerard, because you made a fantastic case for habeas corpus, for presumption of innocence. Yes, so a lot of people are saying, why not let this go to trial? Why does the president have to fiddle anyway? We're talking about someone who was charged in September 2018 with firing on civilians, obstruction of justice, possession of controlled substances. Within the details, according to the official charge sheet, Gerard, includes shooting a teenage girl and an unarmed old man from a sniper's nest, stabbing a teenage ISIS fighter who was wounded and dying, right? So when we look at all of this stuff, right, this was reported by his colleagues and his fellow SEALs. These are serious charges. Why not let it go to trial? Why does the president have to suggest that no matter what, he's going to pardon this guy?
Well, I think the president is going to allow it to go to trial. In fact, just before he left for Japan last week, he specifically stated that he would allow it to go to trial and then see where it is from there. These are disturbing charges. Some of the information that I have seen indicates that many of the witnesses are now changing their story. And specifically with regard to the teenage ISIS fighter, there is helmet camera video out there that has not been made available to the public that would indicate that Chief Gallagher, who is a trained medic, was performing life-saving procedures on this fighter. Why would they do that? Well, certainly they'd want to keep him alive and interrogate him. He was probably somebody who was heavily drugged at the time he was engaged in his combat with U.S. forces, and he's a teenager. He would be easily somebody who could be turned, and we could gain valuable information from him.
Let me ask his life. Okay. So let's ask Waitman Beorn, are you convinced by any of that?
Gerard is absolutely right that Gallagher deserves his day in court for sure, and that it's difficult for any of us sitting on the sidelines to pass any judgment. However, I think that there's a little bit of spin going on here because Trump seemed very clearly willing to pardon him in the same vein that he pardoned Behenna and was talking about pardoning other people until recently, which is typical because he's apparently seen the opposition to this and now says, okay, I'll let it go to trial, and I'm sure that it's going to be he's going to be found innocent. I think one of the issues here is that somehow we think that the defense team, which is doing its job by spinning as much as it can any potential exculpatory evidence in favor of its defendant, why are we giving Gallagher so much benefit of the doubt, and not the 7 Navy SEALs who risk their own careers to come forward over multiple obstacles. I mean, they had multiple superiors saying this threatened their career, Gallagher himself threatening them, and they went forward anyway. And these are some of our most well-trained professional special operators. These are not people who, as Gallagher's team would claim, are doing this out of some kind of personal malice or whatnot. Their motives, even if their motives are that he's incompetent or that he shouldn't be a leader, none of those are incongruent with reactions against his behavior. Again, we look at all the preponderance of the evidence, the preponderance of the charges, any one of which is a war crime, to include the one that hasn't been brought up, which is the promotion ceremony with a dead body present, or his text messages that he sent back, glowing about the killing that he's conducted. And I would also add that something that hasn't been really brought up is that accepting a pardon, which his defense team, on one hand, said they'd be happy to take, but on the other hand, they're happy to go to trial, entails an admission of guilt. Secondly, one of the things that I think is particularly interesting in this scenario is if you look at the preponderance of who this man is as a senior leader, he's a guy who stole from the care packages for his own soldiers. And I can tell you, just as a service person myself and as a veteran, yes, that's not a crime at all, but it is certainly damning in terms of the character of this individual, who, and I agree with Gerard here that of course he has his day in court, but the preponderance of the evidence to me seems to be pretty damning, given the wide variety of things he's accused of. It's not just one thing.
So Gerard, with all of that,
I would just add,
with all of that in mind, and yes, the man's going to have his day in court, why would the president decide to suggest, and the spirit of what he's saying is that this guy is above the law because he's fighting bad guys on my behalf? That's the spirit of what he's saying.
Well, let me just correct one thing the professor said. He used the term preponderance, and in the criminal justice system, that is not the burden of proof. A preponderance of the evidence in legal terms is 51%. In the criminal court, it is beyond a reasonable doubt, which is probably in the 97, 98% range for a conviction. It is something that you would consider to be of the highest value in your life when you come back, when a jury comes back and says guilty. So we first of all, we need to make sure that the standard is correct. And specifically with regard to your question, I don't think that the president is saying that he is above the law. I don't think that's what the point is here. The president has, under our Constitution, the widest range of power when it comes to presidential pardons. And I think it's interesting, though, that President Trump is using his presidential pardon power not at the end of his term, as most presidents do when they are on their way out of office. President Trump is using his presidential pardon power, in fact, as we gear up for a presidential election. So he's not afraid to use that power as we run up onto our election.
It might benefit him to get reelected politically, right? I want to talk a little bit about the politics and the optics here. I want to talk about the lawyer defending Gallagher, because this is an attorney from a boutique law firm that was representing President Donald Trump not too long ago, including his family and the Trump organization. Same lawyer representing the Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher, and he was also a former partner of Rudy Giuliani, right? Very quickly, Gerard, you think there's no conflict of interest there?
That is, no, I don't think I could say that there's no conflict of interest there. However, attorneys often use their personal relationships either with governors or presidents to obtain a presidential pardon. So probably not the cleanest situation,
Right.
but certainly nothing that's unethical under
Right.
the rules of professional
Okay, not the
responsibility.
cleanest. Let's have a little listen to Gallagher's wife on the question of the lawyer. Have a little listen.
We knew Mark Mukasey had represented the president, but there's no direct conflict in my mind, and there's no direct connection. Mark Mukasey has not talked to the president. The president hasn't talked to him. So I think that this insinuation that a lawyer representing one individual that's also representing another is actually just stringing together a conspiracy that's non-existent.
Waitman, Wade, Beorn, non-existent conspiracy cooked up by Trump's enemies, or something to look at?
Well, I mean, I don't want to speculate on the relationship because I don't have any information, and that would be unfair. However, you know, given the way that we've seen Trump behave in other circumstances, I certainly wouldn't rule it out as a possibility. Really, I think that the more interesting piece is the very politicized use of this. The fact that it goes on Fox News and then
Right.
Trump picks it up because he realizes that this is something that his base
Right.
is interested in. The fact that one of the major supporters in the political realm of Gallagher is Representative Hunter, who literally, I think 2 days ago, just admitted that he had essentially, in many ways, committed a war crime himself by taking photographs and posing with dead bodies of enemy combatants, which is, again, one of the many things that Gallagher is alleged to have done. You know, so you can see a certain kind of people lining up behind
Right.
Gallagher, whereas I would say that the true heroes in this case are the Navy SEALs, again, who have come forward to bring this to light.
Right.
And you know, it's one of those things that you know, again, until it goes to court, we won't have a definitive answer. But you know, looking at what we have available right now, there certainly seems to be an awful lot of credible testimony that that makes this something that's very deserving of trial, and that Trump's insinuation last week that he was going to pardon these people because essentially the subtext is that, you know, they are good Americans, they're patriots, they're brave, they're in combat, and bad things happen in combat, which is not how 99% of our military behaves. I think that's really the key here.
Right.
And what makes this just a devastating kind of message to be sending.
As we try to answer, Gerard, where this came from, why Trump wants to do this, might the answer be in Fox News itself, whether it's Hannity's shows or Fox and Friends, Iraq War veteran Pete Hegseth on Fox and Friends, campaigning for Gallagher, and then you see, well, Trump watches and goes, that's something I should pick up on, and they set the agenda for him, and he decides to make a decision. Is that what's happening?
I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is that President Trump pardoned last week Michael Bahena. And I'm a regular Fox News watcher. I'm basically, you know, a news junkie. And I do not recall seeing overwhelming coverage for Michael Bahena. I personally was not familiar with his case. I became familiar with Chief Gallagher's case through Facebook and the Free Eddie Facebook page that I felt was very compelling. There's a lot of information on that. So I don't think that Fox is driving the narrative when it comes to these presidential pardons. I think that Trump is following his own instinct and gut here, and is not concerned with the political outcome of it. I just don't see the politics behind it.
Okay, let's see what happens. Gerard Wittstadt and Waitman, Wade, Beorn, good to have you both on the Newsmakers. Thanks for joining us.